I will turn things over to our Jason Tishko, the Vice President at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation.
Thank you, Josh. I want to welcome everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your day today to be part of this event. It's been a long time coming. It's a conversation that was started around last November when we had brought the full network together to talk about the opportunity around what is now being called learning and employment records, formerly referred to as interoperable learning records. And this has been a long road. So since that time and opening up that discussion about, how can we leverage the T3 network to support this cause, we are now at a major milestone, which is the launch of the LER Resource Hub. A lot of other things have transpired before this, but this is definitely something that we had been shooting for, and we're really excited to bring to the network and to share with all of you. So thank you for being with us on this occasion. And with that, we'll take a look at the agenda. So what we're going to start with is just a little table setting, a little background information about the T3 Innovation Network. We know many of the attendees today are part of the network, so we don't want to continue to share information you already know, but we also know there's a lot of newcomers who are part of the emerging LER ecosystem, who are new to T3 and new to the Resource Hub, and we want to make sure that they understand who we are and why we're involved in this and what we're doing to support it. So we'll do that real quick and in short order, and then we're going to move to the real meat of the meeting, which is giving you a live demo of the LER Resource Hub. As a way to kind of bridge between agenda item 1 and 2, we are going to share with you a new video just released today on the Hub explaining what an LER is. So in 60 seconds or less, a quick explanation for a lay audience about what this opportunity is. And that is something that's going to live on the Hub and be a resource to you. So we're going to debut that, and then we're going to walk you through some of the features of the Hub. And we're going to be hearing from 2 individuals in particular. We're going to hear from Chris Purefoy of Learning Economy Foundation, who is going to be our guide through the Hub. It was Chris and his team that took lead on actually developing the Hub that you're about to experience. And then we're also going to hear from Phil Long, our LER community manager, who has been networking with all the various pilots and stakeholders who are out there in the space and helping inform Chris and our broader team on how we can architect the Hub in a way that's going to be of value to the community. Also, Phil has been recruiting potential pilots, emerging pilots, who are going to be taking advantage of this Hub and actually profiling themselves within it. And we have some exciting updates on that front. We're going to show you some of the first networks who have come in to be part of this event. But we're going to tell you how you can take advantage of it as well moving forward. So Chris and Phil are going to kind of be our guides today once I get past the overview. But we also have several members of the T3 team who have been doing a great deal of work for a while on the underlying infrastructure that's making all of this possible, and who have been making just really important and valuable contributions to getting us to this point and actually building out the resource set within the Hub. So you're going to hear from several of them today, several folks who've been with us for some time now in helping achieve this vision, and we'll offer them opportunities to kind of chime in and direct your attention on certain aspects of the Hub and how to connect the work that's been going on in T3 with the opportunity in this particular resource. So Chris and Phil will lead the show, but we're going to be hearing from a number of T3 players along the way. And of course, we want to hear from you. So we have reserved some time after we hear from Chris and Phil about the Hub itself and how to engage with the Hub to answer any questions that you all might have about what happens from this point forward and how you all can best take advantage of this new resource and make it yours. And then we're going to conclude with some next steps, kind of set your expectations for what's going to come thereafter. So that's the lay of the land. We're going to try to march through this agenda pretty quickly, and I will begin by providing you a very quick overview of the T3 network and LERs. So the T3 Innovation Network is an open innovation network that's led by the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation, but is really made up of over 500 organizations who have come together around building, or I should say around supporting the digital transformation of the talent marketplace. And as we look to the underlying data and technology infrastructure that's going to make it possible, we really do want to work together through collective action to build a decentralized, distributed public-private data infrastructure that's going to accomplish three very big objectives. One, it's going to be that data and technology infrastructure to make all learning count and to render that learning as data that is fully shareable across all of our systems and across all the different stakeholder groups, employers, educators, individuals, and others, military, government. Secondly, to not only make and render all learning count and render it as shareable data, but to also infuse it with rich information about competencies and skills, such that they become the new currency in the talent marketplace. But to, what's the data infrastructure needed to render competencies and skills as data and to make them fully translatable across this ecosystem. And then finally, to leverage all of that in ways that are going to empower learners and workers with their data. So we are making sure that data is working to the advantage of the individual user, and that's whether you're a learner or whether you're a worker or some combination of both, that you have access to this data in ways that's going to actually open up and provide you with more opportunity, not less. So we want to make sure that individuals are the focus here and that we are promoting a data and technology infrastructure that will increase opportunity and create a more equitable talent marketplace. So that's what we've been up to. There's been a lot of different projects underway within T3 broadly, a lot of work with the data standards community, doing data standards mapping and harmonization work, promoting data standards adoption with public partners and others. We've been doing a lot of work to try to get the competency and skill data infrastructure right, to try to make sure that we can render the competencies and skills as data and make them more shareable and increase their utility across the talent marketplace. But then also starting to pioneer some new approaches around digital identity and try to figure out how do we promote self-sovereignty or further explore digital identity in a way that's going to lead to further empowerment of learners and workers. So a lot of different work underway, a lot of the consultants who have been leading those work streams are on this call and have been contributing to the hub. But that's who we are and what we've been up to. And when this opportunity came across our path, what we realized in the LER space is if we're going to be successful, we need to approach this as a data infrastructure problem, not a product problem. There has been a great deal of innovation led by organizations like ACRO and others and Lumina Foundation, who have been seeding comprehensive learner records, CLRs, for some time now, and learning a great deal about how to kind of manage this digital transformation, particularly at a campus level. But now we see a huge opportunity to build upon that work, to really enhance it, enrich it, and scale it by bringing a broader community of stakeholders around those innovations and to now explore this LER space where we essentially need a data infrastructure to enable these records to be produced and to be shareable at a meaningful scale. So we're trying to get the infrastructure right, which is why we thought T3 was so valuable, is a lot of the component parts within the project spaces that we're pursuing are essential to making LERs scalable and to make them a reality. So we want to leverage these projects. We want to leverage this infrastructure. It's not the only thing that we're doing, but we did want to prioritize it and say, let's make LERs a central focus of T3 and all the projects we work in, and let's get that data infrastructure going so we can start mass experimentation with LERs moving forward with a whole diverse ecosystem of partners. So we want an open innovation marketplace of learning and employment records. We want it to be as diverse as possible, but we want it to be use case driven. In T3, we always say that we are standards based, use case driven, and we're vendor neutral. And the same thing applies here around LERs, and it applies to the LER Resource Hub. We want to make sure that we are use case driven, meaning we are not pursuing technology for technology's sake or LERs for LER's sake, but we are using them as a tool to achieve certain outcomes. Outcomes for individuals, learners and workers, outcomes for education providers and training providers, as well as outcomes for employers in the business community. So we went through a process of developing what are those high priority use cases, of which there are dozens. But if we had to focus on a subset, what are the highest priority ones right now where we can, if an LER can solve these problems in the talent marketplace, they're going to add immediate value and the incentives are going to be right such that they get widespread adoption and use. So we went through that process and we made sure we were building this resource set and the infrastructure to address those high priority use cases. And those include a lot of different stakeholders, from the military to the business community, to the post-secondary education community, including higher education, universities and colleges, but not exclusive to them, to community-based organizations, so on and so forth. A lot of different ways one can take advantage of this innovation. And we wanted to make sure in T3 all of them had a seat at the table to explore this innovation and the use cases that matter most to them. And we wanted to make sure that we were also leveraging existing networks and partnerships where possible and building on the foundational work that has already been established. And that includes the great work that has been pursued by organizations like ACRA and Lumina Foundation, who I previously had mentioned, but also builds on some of the work that is occurring within the American Workforce Policy Advisory Board. And it was the AWPAB, co-chaired by the White House and the US Department of Commerce, that had published a paper on, at that time, interoperable learning records. And they had assembled a group of companies and stakeholder organizations who are now collaborating on actually organizing pilots in that space. And we are happy to have been part of those discussions, as well as now making them part of the LER Resource Hub. So we are coordinating with them, and we are making sure that any of the pilots that are emerging from efforts pursued by the AWPAB have a home and a set of resources available to them through this hub, but that this hub is available across the entire T3 Innovation Network and LER ecosystem. So we hope to be the bridge between those pilots and all the other pilots that may be out there that similarly want a seat at the table and want to be able to share their innovation with others, as well as draw from a shared resource set. So this is about building on the great work that's already been laid out in front of us. It's about leveraging the networks that are accelerating innovation in the field today. And it's about inviting a whole set of new players and actors to the table to share in this innovation and opportunity. It's a big tent, it's inclusive, all in. So that's why T3, who we are, what we're doing, why we think it's important to the LER space, and why we thought T3 was particularly important to helping build the right ecosystem for widespread and open innovation in the LER space. Next slide. In terms of the hub itself, something I want to emphasize that Josh had teed up very nicely is the hub is free. Everything we're trying to produce within this hub and the resources we're trying to connect to, we want to make as open, inclusive, and as free as possible. Now that may link to some resources that are proprietary here and there. But if you want to come to the hub, if you want to be featured in the hub, if you want to start accessing resources in the hub, it is there for you. That is why we built it. So it's free for all stakeholders who are interested in pursuing an LER pilot of their own, who want to be known to the community, and who want to shape the kind of resources that are being prioritized within it. It is a community site. While it is a resource hub and has resources you could draw on, the reason we're working with Learning Economy Foundation, you're going to see from what they show you during their tour is it really is about building and supporting a community and creating the right set of tools to help manage that community to encourage collaboration, peer-to-peer engagement, and resource sharing. So we want to make those tools and resources available, but this is all about the actual pilots themselves and the folks who are doing the work on the ground, establishing the best practices and the shared learning that is going to help further refine the resources we can make available, but that's really going to be driving the kind of decision-making and long-term scale and sustainability plays that come out of this space. So it's all about the community and making sure it's fit for them. And it's going to be an iterative resource, meaning this isn't one and done. We're not going to wash our hands and walk away. What you're going to see is the quickest version 1.0 we could come up with that we think is ready for you now. But it is our commitment to continue henceforth to iterate upon this resource and continue to improve, refine, and make it evolve based upon the community's changing needs. So we want to make sure we're constantly hearing from you, and we are also constantly sharing with you when there are going to be iterations and improvements to the hub. And we're going to start setting your expectations for when you might begin to see what that version 2.0 is going to be. So know that this is just the first presentation, but there will be multiple presentations along the way. And with your support and participation, we think we can make it better and better with each iteration. One last note I wanted to make is any information that is being featured here is voluntary. Any information that a pilot chooses to share is voluntary. We are, of course, making sure that per the kind of guiding principles we set and design characteristics that we think should go into an LER hub, that we are asking the right set of questions so we profile them the right way. But we want to be as inclusive as possible. And we want to make sure that we are providing opportunities for any LER pilot to voluntarily submit and share their information. That being said, we cannot and will not compel any information to be shared. But what we will ask is that for those who join, they join in the full spirit of being part of a T3 resource and network. And that means that they are as open as possible and transparent as possible. So we encourage anyone who does come and join as an LER pilot to self-report, to share best practices, to be open and transparent in how you are pursuing your innovation, and to connect with your peers where possible. So we want to encourage that spirit and culture of openness and collaboration, and we'll do our best to live by it. But we do want to also be a big tent and make sure we're bringing as many community actors as possible. So we're going to do our best to strike that balance. And with that, unless I missed anything, which I encourage Josh or others to kind of jump in as part of that table setting, what we would like to share with you now as your first view into the hub is the video. So we're going to have Chris Purifoy from Learning Economy Foundation, who is going to be your tour guide for the hub today. He is going to tee up the video that we have now made available, and then he will take it from there. And it's my understanding that Chris will be calling upon several of our T3 consultants along the way to add to his comments and tour, but then we will also be bringing in Phil Long, who's going to be talking about, well, how can you best engage with this hub going forward? And we'll also help profile some of the pilots that were the first ones to come in as part of this launch. So assuming I didn't miss anything, I'm going to hand the keys over to Chris, and we can start with the video.
Great. Hello, everyone. So I'm just going to go ahead and hop in on the video here.
Every person's career path is different, and keeping track of the sum of our experience can be difficult. Resumes and education transcripts help, but keeping them up to date, accurate, and verifiable is a constant challenge for students, workers, and job seekers. What we need is something like a digital passport, where all of our learning and skills can be brought together in one easily accessible place. That's where LERs come in. An LER, or Learning and Employment Record, is a comprehensive digital record of skills and competencies learned in school, on the job, through volunteer experiences, or in the military. It includes credentials, diplomas, and even employment history. And when all your LERs are combined, it can help you identify training opportunities, explore career paths, and even apply for jobs. Pilot programs for LERs, supported by the T3 Innovation Network, are already underway across the globe. Learn how you can join this movement.
So first, let me start by just saying, thank you to all you who helped make this happen. We had, it took a village, and it was quite a lift, and here we are now. We've organized all of this great information in a really exciting way. And so first, let me say, and just kind of reiterate where, Jason left off here, that this really is a version 1. We have a version 2 coming out that will combine some features with the community to create, new ways of connecting with one another and learning how to plug into this and add new resources to it. In the first version, we've really attempted to, create a comprehensive hub, just exploring the high-level pieces needed to understand how to begin plugging in with LERs, or learning and employment records. And so, so what you'll find, you can go to lerhub.org, and you have a homepage here that anyone can access, and the whole of the hub is actually a public version, so you can access that without logging in, but you can also log in and become a member of the community and begin to offer feedback and introduce yourself and become a part of the community. But it is openly available and publicly available to anyone. At the top, you'll also notice there's a place to register an LER pilot, which we can go into a little bit more later, but there's a place to begin to add your community work to the Resource Hub. So also in the contribution section right here, you'll find a place to ask a number of different questions and to request different edits and suggestions and things along those lines. So, and at the end, we'll come back to some of that, but I wanted to just kind of make that available here at the beginning. And so on the homepage, really, you have a couple of different key sections, and each of these represent high-level spaces within the hub with many different resources. And you have the features section, the data standards, skills and competencies, a digital identity, and a pilots community, as well as a section to explore the tools T3 is creating, and a Q&A section where you can go in and kind of learn and ask questions. And so to begin with, we'll start with the features and the orientation. And so each one of the sections has a bit of a table of contents, which can direct you deeper into it. And each has an overview or a primer, if you will. So you can find that video again here and then kind of learn about some of the basic mechanics of an LER and why it's important. In the Getting Started section, it will walk you through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 process for starting to plug in and understand how to utilize LERs. And not only is there great information in here, but there are links all throughout it to other areas of the hub that may be important and necessary. In addition, there's a section here specifically focused on the pilots. So, and again, this will drive you into the registration and kind of help you understand how you can start to be a part of this. And finally, the use cases. And so we've only highlighted a couple of use cases so far. However, there are more coming. And in this report right here, you can actually find a number of different use cases which have been expressed. But we've started by highlighting one employment use case here. And so, you know, this really is the high-level features section. You know, I wanted to invite, you know, Phil Long, if he has any input before we move on.
Thanks, Chris. I think the section that you described associated with getting started is probably one of the most useful portions there for folks to kind of lays out the structure of the elements you need to consider as you enter through and determine the parts of the process that you need to be able to organize and develop. So I think I just wanted to highlight that section in particular, and we'll come back to the pilot participation. The last thing I'll say in this section is that the use cases actually have two relatively well worked out use cases for an individual going from the military into employment. And so I'd encourage you to take advantage of looking at those a little bit more carefully, because they kind of do a walkthrough of the flow involved, and I think at a more granular level, so it'll give you a sense of, beyond the high level view, the sense of the things that you need to think about, at least from the perspective of the person using these tools. Thanks, Chris.
Great. Yeah, so we'll come back now and hop into data standards. So in the data standards section, it's really organized around understanding the data standards, you know, being able to browse through and find the key resources for each data standard, the key concepts associated with it, and then the standards mapping tool, which T3 has helped to develop. So we'll start at the beginning. And again, with the introductory, it's really just, you know, what, why, and then how is really kind of at the root of understanding it. The data standards directory offers a space for browsing through all the different types of data standards. They're organized by the name of the standard, A to Z, and it really represents, to begin with, only a kind of a preview of some of the standards. We've included a lot of the great standards, but there are many more, and we'll continue to grow this over time. You can see many different standards. And each of these standards has a section for kind of calling out more information on that standard. I'll focus in on the on the LER wrapper and wallet specification, which kind of brings you in and lets you, kind of link off to other resources. We'll get one for IMS, kind of links in and lets you see some of those resources. Get one for PES. And each one is a little different in terms of the support materials, because there really isn't a single, template for a standard, because they represent so many different layers of the ecosystem. So next you have key concepts. And again, these are just a couple of different key concepts that are worth knowing, and they're not prescriptive. It's important to know that. There's always thoughts and conversations about definitions and titles of different types of concepts. But these are just a few of the concepts and how they're used within the hub to help you kind of navigate and understand it. Next, you have the data ecosystem schema mapper, which is an amazing data tool that we've put together, that T3 has put together along with some great partners. And you can see instructions as well as information on that, all within that card. And then when you're ready, you can launch that, and the tool will launch right here within the tool. And I'm sorry, within the hub. And so this kind of gives you a way to come in and begin kind of understanding some of the relationships between mapping standards and things along those lines. So I'd love to invite, Jeannie and Stuart, if you have anything you'd love to add about this section.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, and as you pointed out, you'll see a number of data standards in this section. It is noteworthy that the majority of those data standards were from organizations who were actively involved in T3 and identified standards relevant to LERs. So everything you're seeing here is relevant. Additional standards certainly can be added to this list. And for those organizations that have standards listed here, you will find those that have schemas included with the mapping page that Chris just showed you. And that page, we hope it's really helpful to everyone to see these standards side by side in the context of LERs, and in particular in the context of the priority use cases that were developed with T3 as well. But if anybody has any questions with, in particular, the mapping, there is an email address included in there because we would really like to hear from you and get your feedback on the mapping tool. And the mapping tool also is being built. A permanent kind of sustainable tool is being built. And so this is a temporary page through the end of the year, but we still want it to be as absolutely as helpful as possible with all the hard work that the data standards organizations contributed to this body of work.
Gina, I would only add to that, this is Stuart, I would only add to that, what you'll see in the viewer that was partially shown is the work that has been done so far. The tool that's being developed will enable us to continue mapping as more standards emerge. When someone wants to shift out of the domain, for example, out of the LER domain, this tool will have general applicability when the question arises is, how does this schema compare in terms of content to this other schema? So it has, I think, some surprising and very, very useful results, those mappings for people who are building systems that need to know and achieve some level of interoperability amongst applications that speak different languages.
Yeah, thank you. So great. So next we have the using skills and competencies section, which again has a table of contents, and the broad strokes of this are also an overview, some very specific resources related to skills and competencies, again key concepts, and some of the tools that are being developed. So starting with the overview, just some basic what, how, and why kind of information. In terms of the resources, we have a couple of different sections. One is related to data storage, and again listed A through Z. And they work very similar to how the data standards are organized, where each one has a bit of information that you can find and link off to, and find the different resources organized. Second is the data sources, similarly. So some have more, some have less. It just depends on the volume of the types of resources for each one. And then you have the tool, which I'm going to come back to because we have this in another section coming up. You have the key concepts, again, just a related concepts related to skills and competencies that may be important to understand. And you have the tool, which again has a little bit of info as well as instructions on use and a place to kind of contact someone if you have some ideas or some feedback. So yeah, this is great. I'd love to invite Matt Jeannie and Stuart, anyone that might want to add some additional input here.
Yes, this is Stuart. The purpose of the tool is to free competency frameworks, which are extremely valuable, to free them from the constraints of the legacy formats that we find them in, HTML pages, Word documents, PDFs, and so forth. And the goal of this tool is to make it possible for one to take a competency framework that is being held hostage in these legacy formats and insert them into the tool and have the tool extract the competencies and to then express them in standard machine actionable formats.
And I'll just briefly add, this is the skill and competency space is really hot, obviously, right now, and there's a lot of activity at the ecosystem and market level, and we recognize that. We're going to work hard to keep this up to date. If you have a question about especially sources, if you say, why is my source not in there? It may be because we didn't know about it, or maybe because kind of the minimum criteria here is that it be an open linked data format. That skill and competency data be something that folks can reference in an LER. It needs to be referenceable in one of those learner and employment records. So if you're thinking, how can we make sure that our skills data resource is something that the ecosystem can benefit from in rolling out LERs, that's an important core criteria. And feel free to reach out if there are kind of key updates or additions that you see in this space.
Yeah. And this is Jeannie. I'll just add one more thing to this, that there's still active projects going on with T3 in this space, in the open competency infrastructure, should say open shared competency infrastructure. So there is definitely more to come, and potential for additional resources to be included here.
Yeah, and I'll double click that as well. We have, some of the resources listed are really just some of the ones we had available and we were able to put into this version. This is definitely just a preview for us to seed with some initial content. So much more coming. Right, next we will look at the digital identity section. So similarly, we have an overview, some different resources, some key concepts, and then some different identity orgs and efforts that are underway. A bit of a directory, of an uncomprehensive directory. And so, again, we have a primer, so you can kind of get up to speed on digital identity. On the resources, we have a couple of different resources. We have a lot of which are built around, some of the Pilot 10 work group. And you have, some resources related to W3C and DIDS, similarly for self-sovereign identity. Some different principles available in there you can find. Some information about data privacy that just, it's a bit of a summary of the laws. There is also the wrapper specification is here as well, the wrapper spec, which is a really incredible document everyone should look into to really help and guide that work. And then the T3 identity report, the Project 10 report is available right here as well. Again, key concepts related to identity. There's a few more here. This is an interesting category. Some new complexities that are worth understanding. And then again, a directory of some of the organizations and efforts who are starting to make quick work of this new great technology. So I'd love to invite Phil, if you have any additional things you'd love to add.
Sure, thank you, Chris. And the main thing I just want to put a punctuation on is the, well, two things actually. One is there's a nice a piece by Christopher Allen on the 10 principles of digital identity, which I think are still useful for taking a look at and getting a real good sense of what we're trying to accomplish by the use of digital identities. Secondly, there is a report that Kim put together that shows what digital identities are in relation to the LERs, which I think is particularly helpful. And it is, it's a good read. That's the applying the principles to interoperable learner records. And it really sets it in context. So one of the challenges of this space is trying to keep all of the bits and pieces together and understand the overall interconnections of the parts. And this is one of the particular areas where I think that a good job has been done to help people do that. Chris?
Great. Yeah, so lastly, let's look at the pilots community, which, you know, again, a version 1 of this is very much in the directory space, helping to kind of have an open Q&A. There's a space, you know, to introduce yourself and things like that. But in V2, it'll be more focused on community and actually being able to understand, you know, what types of pilots need, you know, different various resources and, you know, providing a way to make, you know, or to help make some of those connections. But in this version, we really, on the table of contents here, we have a couple of prompts, and in addition to links to resources. The first one is to share best practices. You know, if you share a best practice here, it is shared privately with T3, and we'll be reviewing those. And in version 2, we'll have a section for best practices as they emerge. It's a space to share some ideas or questions, a Q&A space, and it's a space to introduce yourself, which is a great way to just go ahead and plant yourself in the directory and say hello and become a part of the community here. But in this section, we have a couple of top level spaces. The first is for the network tools, which we've shown you both of already, but we have them both listed here. And that'll continue to grow as new tools come, and as these tools evolve, they'll change. We have a space for the directory of pilots, which have been submitted, and these again are not in exclusive or comprehensive order, right? This is a preview of some of the pilots that have come already and submitted through Phil, but we'll be continuing to add these as others register. And each of these provides a good bit of information about the pilots, so they can not only help to recruit others who may help, but it's a space to learn from as you begin to start to pilot yourself. And so, you know, each of these has, you know, the participating organizations, the goals. It has a summary of the use case, explains the different types of records that are exchanged and the data standards that are used, kind of helps to outline the landscape of where they're at along the way, and express a timeline of what's to come. It also explicitly shows what some of the needs are, so we can help to start to make those connections and a number of other things. You know, are they willing to share the information with the community, information about, you know, support and competency data, you know, the criteria for success, and so on. And each are a little different because they each have, you know, some different unique components, but we have a common framework that allows for us to display all of this in the directory. So we encourage you to continue to submit, and at the bottom of this section is a place to submit, and you'll also find a place on the front page. And the Hub members, again, this is just a place to introduce yourself. It's been seeded by a couple of the folks. And in the Q&A, yeah, there are a few question and answers already in place, but you know, again, that have resources right here. So if, you know, if you have information that's incorrect and you want to change it or submit edits, you can come in here to do that. You can do it right from here. The same goes for submitting resources. So if you have a question, you can submit it to this section and we can get back to you on it. So, I mean, that pretty much covers it. You know, there's more to come, but, you know, just to kind of outline a couple of the things that we know are coming in version 2. You know, again, The communication aspects will be increased, so allowing for pilot groups where you can begin to communicate and organize some of the work that's happening if it's needed. We're adding a matching space for this where we can start to match stakeholders and pilots and basically needs with resources. We're adding a robust search engine and we are adding a space for developers to sandbox together and to have a community around some of the development work that's happening. Let me go ahead and pop over here though. I think I want to invite Phil back in now and let's have a quick conversation about how to engage with this. And then I think we'll be ready for some Q&A.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I mean, I think everybody has seen a number of entry points to the way in which you can contribute information. It starts, if you could go to the home page, it starts there. And on the home page, you see, much like in the pilots in the community section, a set of prompted messaging areas, which allow us to solicit from you specific questions about what kind of help you need, what kind of requests you'd like to ask of the hub and the resources that we have. And more, as importantly, to point out things that we're missing. All of those will go directly into a private messaging queue, which we are moderating and will be responding to on a prompt basis, I hope, as we go forward. So that's one point. The second up there is the listed Q&A section. There are prompted questions. You got a brief overview of that before, but the Q&A gives you a way to elaborate in greater detail on the kinds of things that you're specifically interested in help around. And in a context that can be done where everybody else can learn from that process. So there's a number of points for being able to share the questions that you have either publicly or just with the T3 staff, and to do so in a way that builds and extends and enriches this particular resource for everyone. There is the registration link that you saw at the bottom of the pilots community, and that registration link literally brings you to a Google form and allows you to fill in the information about the pilot that you would like to see in that directory. It will come to us. We'll take a look at it. If we have any questions, we will fill in with your collaboration the information that we think is important to express what you're trying to do, but it's your information and it's the way that you would like to share the work that you're doing. The pilot directory actually is an important thing to recognize. List pilots at all different levels of participation and scope. So some of you are doing things and you're at the very beginning stages, you're doing discovery, you've got some ideas about how you want to go about it, you think you know what the data standard might be for the credential that you're interested in, or credentials, etc. And that may be all you have, but you have a project in place and you're committed to it, and therefore if that's where you are, that's where you should be placing yourself in the directory. On the other hand, you may have 3 or 4 partners already working, you may have some architecture already built out, you may have some ideas of how you're doing your digital identity, and indeed some of you may actually be in the process of pilot testing this in your communities. That's one that's much more comprehensive, and presumably you would have a lot more to share to those who are just getting started, and we ask if you're willing to do that. So it's a generative way to share what you're doing and the progress you're making, where you are. You shouldn't be shy if you haven't completed a lot of work yet. If it is something that you're really committed to do, you should share it. And we'd like to get the attention of the community and the world back to you for the efforts you're making in this space. So those are the core things that I think represent the intent of the LER pilots and the directory, and the ways in which you can engage with us to make sure that your voice is heard and your voice is expressed. Chris?
Yeah, great. I mean, I think that gets us there. I think we're maybe ready for a Q&A, unless you have anything to add, Jason or Joshua.
No, just wanted to thank both you, Chris, and Phil for walking us through that, and for all the T3 consultants and all the partner organizations who make up T3, who have contributed to getting us this far. We're really excited to to bring this resource hub to you. And I want to give a special thanks out to the funders who make T3 possible. Those funders include Walmart, Gates Foundation, Lumina Foundation, the Annie Casey Foundation, Microsoft Philanthropies, and Google.org. All of them invested in different component parts of the T3 Innovation Network that has culminated in this resource hub being available to you now. So we do want to recognize that without their support, we wouldn't be here. And I always like to emphasize that, you know, the T3 network is the organizations that make it up and contribute and make this kind of open collaboration possible. So I wanted to thank not just the folks who've had the privilege to play a leadership role in this particular project, but for all the organizations that make up and contribute towards the T3 network that has made all of this possible. So I just wanted to get those thank yous out there now as opposed to later. But happy to pass the baton back to Josh and others to help manage a quick Q&A.
Great, thanks, Jason. Just one area I did want to make sure that we touch on again here at the end before we jump into Q&A is, again, that the Resource Hub, everyone can view it. It's open to the public just by going on lerhub.org. You can just start clicking through all different parts of it. But if you want to engage in the community, if you want to leave comments and reach out to people and be noticed and share your organization's information, that is when we really encourage you to actually to click the register here button and become part of the community, because that just opens up more possibilities of how you can engage. But again, that's not mandatory, but if I know many people in the chat have been saying, how can we work with everyone more? That would be the best step forward, is to register so we can find you. Now, as for questions, I'm going to bring up a few questions and point them to different panelists from the chat. I also received a number of questions through email throughout this last week, so I will also be referring to those as well. The first question that I received as an email earlier in the week is actually to Jason. Jason, the question was, is this LER Hub only US based, or is this an international, or can international bodies use this hub?
Yes, both the T3 Innovation Network as well as the LER Resource Hub are global. They are not US specific. That being said, there probably is a stronger US presence, but that is not necessarily by design or intent. So it is going to be our commitment to the broader community to increasingly make both the network as well as the Resource Hub increasingly global or international. So there's if you're outside the US, you have every right and ability to participate. We do know that brings some additional challenges in terms of making sure we have the right languages support and things like that. Like we will get there, but it is our intent to make this a global resource and network, and we will do everything within our power to achieve that vision. And as many of you who are in T3 know, we have some kind of bold plans for the future as we move beyond this calendar year into the next, and we plan to continue to not only grow this resource, but plan to move T3 itself into a new phase where it will become a much larger global network of networks to support the digital transformation of the talent marketplace. And we will be very intentional at that point to make it global in design. So if you're outside the US, you have a welcome seat at the table here, as well as in the hub. So let us know how we could best involve you, include you, and support you. All in, very inclusive.
The next question's for Phil about LER pilots. There was questions about how much information needs to be made public, and when you fill out the LER pilot survey or submission form, do you have to fill in all of the elements?
Absolutely, we're strict task. No, I'm sorry. The answer to that is there is an outline intended to try to give an overall sense of the work that's underway. You fill it out to the extent that you're comfortable. It's your representation of yourself. And so if you want to skip things because you haven't done anything in that space yet or you haven't thought about it, you can either note not applicable or working on it, or you can just leave it blank. You can, if you prefer, go into greater detail in the things that you are involved in, and we encourage you to express essentially at the depth and at the level that you want the rest of the community to be aware of your work, and perhaps, if interested, to solicit from that inquiries and collaborations that perhaps stem from the work that you're currently underway.
Great, thank you, Phil. The next question's for Chris about the current state of the hub, but also the future. So there is a lot of T3 network resources currently on the hub. How, in its current state, as well as the version 2, how am I able to let you know about additional resources to either add in data standards or the competency section? How can I make those available?
Yeah, great question. And so on the home page, there is a button there that says contributions. And if you click that, there is a section to submit all sorts of resources, submit ideas, as well as, make changes, or at least suggest changes to what we have. And we'll field each of those as they come in. And for version 2, we're going to add a lot more in terms of not only resources, but community tools. So, and also, I would also say in version 2, that will become a little bit easier as well, as we'll be inviting kind of a different way of taking in registration feedback and actually having it be a part of, kind of a bit of a community effort. So.
Great. And the only thing I would add to that, right now it's making us aware of more resources, and we're going to start list building. In version 2, we will have an official submission form that this way all resources and all tools will follow the same prompts of, who owns the resource, what is it about, how can I find out more, are there any barriers or pay structures to using things. We want to make sure that we build out a submission form that can be used across the hub, and that everyone will be filling it out individually, so that it's the information you're providing to the community instead of us providing it on your behalf. And then the other question that I know was asked earlier in the chat function, again, today's webinar is being recorded. We will share out the recording and the PowerPoints and a link to the hub and these action steps through the T3 Network listserv. So if you're a member of the listserv, which right now we have over 1,000 email addresses, we will be sending all that information through there to, again, get this, and feel free to share that out to your networks. At this point, that was all the questions I saw in the queue. If you have a question, you can either ask them in the chat function, or you can also raise your hand, and I'm happy to unmute you and you can ask the question verbally.
Josh, I would just add to that if anyone just has any comments or observations, doesn't have to be a direct question for us or the team here. Just any observations folks want to make based on what you've seen, whether it's about the functionality of the site, what happening within the LER ecosystem, or the video, for example. We would welcome you to join the conversation.
We did get one question here in the questions box. Are the skills and competencies industry specific that are currently in the hub? And so I wanted to see Jeannie and Stuart or Matt, as you guys focus on competencies and skills, if you would like to respond to that.
Yeah, so I can quickly jump in. So there are a number of skill and competency data sources and resources in the hub, some of which have industry-specific context attached in kind of linked data format to those skills and competencies, some of which don't. And so I would say that the ability for whether your use case for your LERs in the context of your pilot, that industry-specific competency model, if it's very, very important, then you think through kind of your selection of open competency or skill data as having that ability to ensure that industry-specific context is tagged in there as well.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And just to add to that, the majority of those competency kind of sources that are listed are registries where you can access a multitude of competencies, some of which would be, industry, healthcare, manufacturing, IT, and so on and so forth. And the only thing I'd add to that is it would probably be helpful on the hub if those descriptions included that so you could know, instead of having to spend a lot of time clicking. So that's a very helpful question.
I would also add something to that. While wasn't here and ready for the launch of the hub, we do have a T3 project that is getting ready, it's in the next couple of weeks, to go into a prototyping phase. It's called the OCF Collab, Open Competency Framework Collaborative, which will be a trust network of the registries that Jeannie just mentioned, plus others that are emerging, that will make it possible for you to approach any one of the nodes in this trust network and find what that registry, that node contains, but also be able to ask to see anything else, a listing of everything else in the network, so that you can search the whole network of competency frameworks. We talked, that the CFEM, the competency framework extraction module, was targeting freeing competencies from their legacy frameworks, legacy formats, and the OCF Collab is intended to provide, through the registries, the place for those frameworks to live, and then be able to discover them across the network. And again, we're getting ready now to go into piloting of or prototyping of that within the next couple of weeks. And I think that will provide lots of mechanisms for getting at all of those frameworks, including the industry frameworks and the sector-specific frameworks.
Thank you, team. So I see that there's a few hands raised, so I'm going to unmute Peter Smith to talk, and Pat Leonard, you are on deck. And Peter, you should be unmuted now.
Whoop, did I unmute? Am I unmuted or did I?
We can hear you.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Josh. I'm also involved. I'm at University of Maryland Global Campus, and we're involved with the Open Skills Stack Alliance. And I had a question in general, maybe for Matt. I know these are in the same space. I'm not enough of a technical person. I'm still learning about this stuff, as exciting as it is, and because it is. But how do these two efforts collaborate? Or are we one of the sources of skills and common language, et cetera, for T3? Or are we just moving in parallel and then we're going to find out how to join up later? I mean, how do I think about these things?
Yeah, great question. So I provide the similar answer to the question that was asked in chat about the Trust Over IP Foundation. That is a kind of similar nascent network where the Open Skills Stack Alliance is just now forming. It's a community of practice around open skills. There will likely be deliverables coming out of OSSA work groups that will be supportive and referenced in the hub in future versions. But since there aren't any deliverables yet out of that particular alliance that could be included in the hub, it's not included in the launch.
Gotcha. Thank you.
No problem.
Great. And Pat, I am now unmuting you. You should be able to talk.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
I feel like a Verizon commercial. I just wanted to respond to Calvin's question that he posted in chat. How does this project align with other initiatives like some of the work that Crevy is doing? And we too are participating in the OSSA, and by extension, with regard to the work we've been doing with Student Clearinghouse of integrating the capacity for being able to import non-academic professional credentials into the, interestingly, the National Student Clearinghouse, My Hub not the LER Hub, but the My Hub product that Clearinghouse offers. So consider that as sort of the pre-step before the T3 formation, et cetera, that we had already done to embed or make visible professional credentials along with academic credentials all within one environment. And I expect, not in this first phase, but perhaps in next evolution of some of the things that Clearinghouse or others may be doing, we expect that's going to be leveraged for that work. So we're participating in a couple of the hubs that are going on just to this point of how do you also include industry certifications that are resume and workplace worthy and important into the whole profile. So more to come on that, but just wanted to say, yes, you know, we're nested in the midst of all this, but not necessarily called out.
Great, thank you, Pat. That was the last hand that was raised. I have now seen some more questions in the chat. So there was a question from Michael J. about some of the Matchmaker Ed Labs work and functionality of the tool. Michael, I'll respond, but if you feel free to raise your hand and I can also unmute you. But it looks like the question is, would that resource be available? Could it be available on the hub? And I think that's something that, again, we are encouraged to learn more about resources and tools and the ability to add them to the hub. And so if you leave that in the Q&A section, or if you leave it in the section on contributions, we would be happy to learn more about those resources and opportunities to highlight them. And Michael, I think I just saw you raise your hand. I will unmute your line now. You are unmuted.
Great, thanks, Josh. So the question really had to do with the live nature of the existing LER implementation and whether we should be looking at creating an alternative repository on which we implement our work as part of the pilot effort, or whether we should be turning to this implementation and looking at an integration here for our PP6 related efforts in dynamically mapping.
Yeah, Josh, do we want to have Matt maybe take a first stab at that?
Yes.
Since it was a Project 6 reference.
Yes, I think I may have not fully gotten the question. It sounds like when might Project 6 resources show up in the hub?
You know, Matt, it's really we have functionality that allows us to do dynamic mapping between competencies, resources, et cetera. As part of the pilot that we're going to be putting together with partners, the question is, should we be creating an LER reduced functionality separate implementation, or should we look at taking advantage of the LER as it's being built out as a place for that pilot work to be done? You know, it's the difference between having a live resource versus something that's a development resource.
Got it. Well, it seems to me like what you guys are working on would be an incredibly beneficial resource to a number of folks doing LER pilots, that kind of dynamic mapping internally of competency data. So I would think that if it makes sense for you guys, going ahead and submitting and saying, hey, can we get our resource included as one of the available resources in the hub itself.
Okay, great. And I'll follow up with you, Matt. Thanks.
Great.
Great. The only other question I see in the queue right now, this is a question from Jennifer about participating in the collab. And Jennifer, I wasn't sure if you were referencing the LER pilot, that's the Colorado lab, or if you were talking about the T3 network tool, the Open Competency Framework Collaborative. So feel free to raise your hand. I'm happy to unmute you to ask the question. Oh, the latter. Great. Well, for that, I will put in the chat right now a link to join that work group that will be sharing more information about the OCF Collaborative. They've been working since the summer of 2019 to talk through some of these, the ways to develop the architecture and protocols around this prototype. So I will make sure to send you that information to get involved. And that would be the best way to do that. With that, that looks like it's all of the questions in the chat and the Q&A. But again, we still have time. So if others would like to raise their hand or ask more questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
And Josh, one thing I wanted to reiterate, while folks may be gathering their thoughts, is that as part of one of the planned iterations going forward, we do plan to integrate our JDX resource set. So for those LER pilots that are going to want to be also leveraging resources that will allow them to use them, for example, to apply for or to compare to job opportunities, to the extent you need to create structured data on the job side, whether it's a job posting or description, we're going to be making those technical resources available for adoption and use in those kinds of pilot scenarios. So all the JDX Job Schema Plus, there's already some basic resources in place in the hub for that, but we plan to further round those out because we think a lot of the more interesting use cases involve comparisons of LERs with jobs, and you need structured data on both sides. So planned iterations going forward is more and more integration around JDX. So I just wanted to make sure folks were aware of that.
Great, and we'll give it about one more minute to see if there's any additional questions. With that, Jason, did you have any additional closing remarks? And I'll also check in with Phil and with Chris if there's like one last thing you'd like this group to know.
I'll let Chris and Phil go first.
So I'll start. This is Phil. There was a last comment in the chat about OSSA and whether there are resources there, and we're looking forward to incorporating resources that point to them when they have a landing spot for us to point to. They're early on in their development as well, so we look forward to including that, but we'll be happy to share whatever we learn about the activities that are going on through the hub. Only other comment is just a shout out to the team involved and an invitation to those of you in the community to help make this better, because the team has done a terrific job and it can only be made even better still with your collaboration and support. So thanks to everyone.
Yeah, same. I mean, I think this is really great. There's been so many folks who have helped us get here, so I want to just double click that. For what Phil said, thank you all for your help, and we're looking forward to continuing this work.
And Jason, there's still no additional comments in the chat, so we will give you the last word.
Yeah, and I know we had some latecomers, so just wanted to reiterate for the chat box that we will have a recording of this video and we'll be distributing that post-meeting. We'll find other places, whether on the T3 website or in the hub, to kind of host a link to it. So we will make sure that this information is broadly disseminated and available to you. If you have any trouble at all accessing it or seeing it, just reach out to either Josh or myself at the email addresses listed there on your screen, and we'll be happy to connect you to those and many other resources. Wanted to also emphasize that you do not need to be a member of T3 to participate in or enjoy the resources in the hub. Though we would welcome you to become a member. It is free, it is open, there is no obligation. It just makes sure that you're plugged into opportunities like this one, but can also dive into other issues related to digital identity, competency and skill data, and data standards that we're working on beyond the hub. You have an opportunity to listen in on conversations, you have an opportunity to shape them and participate fully in them and guide the work. It is an open innovation network, it is your network. So free and open to join. We encourage you to join both T3 as well as to become involved in the hub. And just want to emphasize that this is your hub, not ours. So we need to hear from you all on how it could be a better resource for you and have utility for the work that you're doing. So speak up early and often, be the squeaky wheel, and take advantage of it, because the folks who get in there first and who give us feedback are the ones that we're going to be listening to. So we encourage you to get involved. We're doing this for you, certainly not for us. So anything we can do to be a resource to the community, that is our mission. That is our North Star. So please do get involved, because we want to really build upon the great work that Chris, Phil have demonstrated for you here, but that so many others have contributed towards, including Matt, Bob Sheets, Jeannie Kitchen, Stuart Sutton, and so many others, including Josh Westfall, who's helped coordinate all of this. So we want to continue to serve you and to serve you well. But in order to do that, we need you to be a meaningful and engaged participant, and need to communicate with us. So we're giving you every opportunity to take advantage of these resources, and hopefully we got it a little bit right today. So more to come. This is iterative. You will be seeing updates in the future about updates to the hub, as well as plans for a variety of supporting T3 projects going forward, or efforts underway by many of our partners like Credential Engine or OSSA or others that are doing incredible work in this space that we hope both to leverage and contribute towards. So with that, unless anyone else from the team has anything else to share, I'd just like to say thank you all. We really do appreciate you spending this time this afternoon with us. And anything you could do to help us get the word out. This was a soft launch, just a nice, easy rollout. But if you can help us spread the word and connect the right people to these resources, we would be in your debt. So we'll try to continue to hit the drumbeat and go recruit more folks and share the hub with others. But our ask of you is to participate in it and to share this opportunity with others that may benefit from it. So with that, thank you, team. Thank you to everyone who participated today. And we will be in touch.